Year 10 and 11, welcome to your revision for the poem The Charge of the Light Brigade in preparation for your AQA English Language Poetry exam. The poem. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. There they had fought so well, came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered. Honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade, noble 600. What is the poem about? The poem is about the Crimean War, which was fought between Britain and Russia between 1853 and 1856. For the first time in history, newspapers carried eyewitness reports, as well as detailing not just the triumphs of war, but the mistakes and horrors as well. The most significant moment in the Crimea came during the Battle of Balaclava. An order given to the British Army's cavalry division, known as the Light Brigade, was misunderstood, and 600 cavalrymen ended charging down a narrow valley straight into the fire of Russian cannons. Over 150 British soldiers were killed and more than 120 were wounded. At home, the news of the disaster was a sensation, and a nation that had until then embraced British military exploits abroad began to question the politicians and generals who led them. The structure of the poem. This slide is probably for your grade 7, 8 and 9 students with some key terminology, and then I shall do another slide on structure that's slightly simpler. So you have 6 numbered stanzas which vary in length from 6 to 12 lines. And each line is in dimeter, which means it has 2 stressed syllables. Each stressed syllable is followed by 2 unstressed syllables, making the rhythm dactylic. Okay, so there's 2 keywords in bold. Now this is what we call the falling rhythm. So this use of falling rhythm is appropriate in a poem about the devastating fall of the British Brigade. So that the dactylic rhythm, this falling rhythm, links to the falling of the British men and the death of the British men. The other hugely important thing in Charge of the Light Brigade is the volta, and the volta occurs at the line, but not the 600. If you don't know what a volta is the moment in a poem when the tone changes, and it is at that line, because that is when we realise that when the men are returning home, if you like, that a lot of them are missing, that there's not 600 left anymore, because a lot have been killed and a lot are wounded. So that is the change, but not the 600. That is your volta, okay? Please pause the video here to make sure you note down the key words that I have mentioned and obviously the spelling of those words. I've got more to say about structure on the next 2 slides. A little bit more about structure then is, as I said earlier, it's got a strong rhythm, this with 2 heavy beats followed by 2 light beats, which represent the galloping horses. This incessant dun 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 is the horses running to their death. We have 6 numbered stanzas, which represents a memorial to the cavalrymen. Each stanza obviously can represent 100 soldiers, and then the six stanzas there equals the 600. Also, we have this idea of a rigid structure reflecting the rules of the military. So we know when we read the poem that the men can't defy an order and that they have to follow the rules and the routines. But also, this structure, when we look at it on the page, appears to mimic that of a newspaper report, the way it's set out, almost like in a column fashion. And remember, as I said a moment ago, this is one of the first times in history that newspapers carried eyewitness reports, and in this case it details the mistakes of war. And so we have that reminder that this is an eyewitness report of a terrible moment in British history. And your final information for structure is we have the occasional use of the rhyming couplet. Again, it could represent the incessant noise of the horses, or even the 2 sides of the battle, Russia versus Britain, or even, which I quite like as an interpretation, the inevitability of death. The fact that these men have went to battle knowing that they stand a huge chance of losing and dying for their country. The poem is also a ballad. The story, obviously, of the Light Brigade, and it has this tragic ending that at the end of the poem, not all of them will return. And we have refrain. Refrain is used at the end of each line, and it is used to emphasise the number of men risking their life. And remember, it's rode the 600. Rode the 600. Okay. And then finally, the poem begins in medias res, and that means that in the middle of something. So we know that as a reader, we are plunged into this war zone, and that's almost a mirror image of exactly what happened to the men. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward is your in medias res. It's like the reader is thrown into this battle and we can't really do much. We can't actually defend ourselves properly. Much like the British Army against Russia, who heavily outnumbered us. There's a lot said about structure there, so make sure you pause. Key things being, if you're looking for your A star, that you've got dimeter and a dactylic falling rhythm with a volta, which changes the tone of the poem. If you're not going to remember that, then try and remember that we have a strong rhythm with 2 heavy stressed beats followed by 2 light unstressed beats, which represents the inevitability of death and the galloping horses. We have this rigid structure that seems to mimic a newspaper report, and this routine that the military follow. We get the occasional use of a rhyming couplet, again, 2 sides of the battle and the inevitability of death. The use of a ballad is the full structure of the poem, if you like, as it ends tragically. With refrain used at the end of each line to emphasise how many men are risking their life. And the poem begins in medias res, which means in the middle of something. So there's a lot said on structure there. And just in case I didn't explain refrain there, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I've explained it. A refrain, if you don't know, is a verse or a phrase that is repeated at intervals throughout the poem. So as I said for you, and in this instance it is rode the 600, just to, as I say, emphasise the fact that there was only 600 men and they were heavily outnumbered. Okay, we're going to move to language now. So stanza 1 then, half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said, into the valley of death rode the 600. So we've got repetition then in half a league and half a league. The use of repeated phrases throughout, as I mentioned earlier, is refrain, and it emphasises the incessant gunfire that they face, but also the orders that the men are facing from the people in charge, and it's fast and it's furious. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, and we almost feel as a reader as if we are standing there receiving the orders firsthand. Massive metaphor that's repeated is the valley of death, and this suggests that the men are running to die. They are running into death, and that they can't avoid it. It's almost as if death is surrounding them, if you picture a valley, and actually that they are trapped. And I suppose that's one of the key things in this poem, that our 600 men were outnumbered and were vulnerable. And then we get some speech. Forward, the Light Brigade, and it makes it realistic. And remember, this is one of the first wars that was reported, so this speech is like an eyewitness account of somebody that's telling us exactly what's happened, again, firsthand, and it makes it all the more poignant. And naturally, we've got the emotive language, death, because, as I say, this is a tragic moment in British history, where our poor men, as we see, were outnumbered and were being slaughtered, really. The stanza ends with "Rode the 600", as I mentioned earlier. That is your refrain, and it reminds us, and it reminds us, and it reminds us that there's only 600 of them. And actually, in a war zone, in a battle, that isn't many soldiers at all. Okay? And we move into stanza 2. Forward, the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. So again, we've got that speech, just reiterating that they are following orders. And the rhetorical question, was there a man dismayed? And that is an interesting line, because it shows us that regardless of what the men think, they must complete their duty. So they run into this situation whereby they are outnumbered and they're getting murdered and they're getting slaughtered, and they can't defy military rule or military law. So they complete this mission knowing full well that they might die. And therein lies this theme of bravery and honour. And we get that at the end. The word blundered is massive for us, because we know that a mistake has been made, and yet they still fight on. And again, it is this idea that these men are heroes and that they are following an order that is a mistake. It's a blunder. Repetition, there's not to make reply, there's but to do and die. And again, as I say, it's the following of orders, regardless of situation, regardless of what the conclusion will be, you follow your order. And we get our emotive language again here through die and death. The valley of death, that metaphor is repeated again, and rode the 600, as I mentioned earlier, your refrain. Stanza 3, cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. So we've got this repetition, and it's a triple as well, cannon, 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 and it's this idea that the men are trapped in the valley, trapped in the gunfire. There's no escape. It's as if the cannons are surrounding them. And when we add that to the alliteration and the sibilance of the S, stormed at with shot and shell, we hear this incessant gunfire, and we start to feel sympathetic. And as a reader, we start to feel penned in and closed in, as if we are trapped. And then we have the jaws of death and the mouth of hell. So your personification here. So the valley of death has now become the jaws of death and the mouth of hell. And by personifying the valley, it sounds more deadly and it sounds more dangerous, as if when they head to death, the mouth will close and that's it. You know, it's this idea once again that they can't escape, that death has chased them and has eaten them. And therein lies a bigger threat than just the Valley of Death. The Valley of Death almost sounds a little bit more open, whereas I think the jaws of death and the mouth of hell sounds worse. And don't forget, hell is synonymous with the devil, and it's not a place that we think of positively. It has negative connotations of evil. The theme of bravery is mentioned here, though, in your adverb boldly, and the theme of bravery will be brought up again at the end of the poem, so have that in mind. Stanza 4, flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the guns there, charging an army, while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600. So we've got a lot of action in this stanza, the flashing of the sabre, the charging, the plunging, and it's frantic and it's fast and it's furious is this stanza. And it is this stanza where we get our Volta, where we get our change in tone, when we realise that they are dying and that there isn't 600 men left anymore. And therein the tone becomes more solemn, more sombre, more upsetting, I suppose, and we realise the full implication of the blunder from the beginning is that it has led to death. The mention of the world wondering as well, because this is being reported by newspapers and by witnesses, and it's a mistake. And it's a famous moment in history, so perhaps the world is wondering, will the British survive? Why was a mistake made? Who made the mistake? Stanza 5. A lot of repetition again. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them. Volleyed and thundered, stormed out with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. So, we've got our repetition at the beginning again. I've mentioned that before. Stormed out with shot and shell, I've mentioned before. Now, interesting line here is while horse and hero fell. The alliteration of the H makes it more prominent. And there's your theme of bravery. These men are heroes risking their lives. Risking their lives for not only the country, but risking their lives based on a mistake, based on misinformation. And the fact that it says the hero fell reminds us of our falling dactylic rhythm that links to the theme of death. They that had fought so well. And look at this, they came through the jaws of death. So remember, some people do survive and they come back from the mouth of hell, and that line's massive. And I suppose if we had our Volta earlier, there is a slight upward trend there in the sense of our tone changes to something slightly more positive, not hugely though, because we realise that some men have fought and returned, and not only have they fought through the valley of death, but they fought through the jaws of death and they've come back from a hell. And in that instance, we realise the bravery, and we have this powerful image of a hero on a horse. And look at that, them, all that was left of them, left of 600. And our refrain changes slightly there. And I think all that was left of them is very sad, all that was left of them. And it has a sympathetic tone to it. And lastly, when can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered. Honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade, noble 600. So we have another rhetorical question. When can their glory fade? The question is huge because it's asking if we're going to remember them. And it's almost irony because we do remember them, not only through this poem, but through this historical moment. Many people in the world will remember the Light Brigade and this poem, the charge of the Light Brigade. Cannon to the left of them, cannon to the right of them. It's huge. And look at the word glory. It is a glorious moment because some have survived. They have defended our country. The The world wondered again. The world wondered about the charge they made. The world wondered about the mistake. The world wondered whether they would be remembered, and they have been. And then we get, again, our theme of bravery in the word honour and the word noble, because they should be honoured. They are brave. They are heroes. And Road the 600 has changed to Left of 600, which now changes to the Noble 600. And we have an ending to the poem that is honorary, that we are told to remember them, that we know we should remember them. So in terms of language devices, I think this poem's one of the easiest ones in the section. Structure is slightly more difficult to remember, so please make sure you go back and note down the structural devices that have been mentioned. And I hope this video has been useful. Please check out my other videos. Just type my name into YouTube, which is Stacey Reay, Stacey, and Reay is Reay. And good luck in your English literature poetry exam.